The morning of Friday, June 6, 2025, began like any other in the sprawling metropolis of Los Angeles. But honestly, that sense of normalcy was shattered as a massive federal operation unfolded across the city. Agents from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement working alongside the FBI and the DEA descended on several locations in a series of coordinated raids. Reports quickly surfaced of heavily armed officers at two different Home Depot stores, a clothing warehouse in the bustling fashion district, and even a local donut shop. These places, usually filled with the sounds of commerce and community, became scenes of confusion and fear as the day's events began to take shape, signaling a significant escalation in federal immigration enforcement. The operation was executed with a precision that caught many by surprise. Federal agents, clad in tactical gear and arriving in armored vehicles, established perimeters around the targeted businesses. Their mission was to apprehend individuals suspected of being in the country without legal authorization. By the end of the day, officials confirmed that at least 44 people had been arrested for immigration violations. In the chaos that ensued, another person was taken into custody for obstruction of justice, a charge that really highlighted the tense atmosphere on the ground. This wasn't a quiet, low-profile action, it was a large-scale, visible display of federal power in the heart of one of America's most diverse cities. The visual impact of the raids was powerful and, for many, deeply unsettling. Eyewitnesses described scenes that looked more like military operations than civil law enforcement actions. The use of flashbang grenades and tear gas was reported as crowds of onlookers and protesters began to gather. The federal agents were not just there to make arrests, they were prepared for resistance and came equipped to control any potential unrest. This show of force transformed everyday commercial locations into zones of confrontation, leaving an indelible mark on those who watched it happen, whether they were directly involved or simply trying to go about their day in a city suddenly thrown into turmoil. Adding to the complexity of the day, it was later revealed that this was not an isolated event. Just a week earlier, on May 30th, ICE had conducted another raid at an underground nightclub, arresting 36 Chinese and Taiwanese nationals. The June 6th operation, however, was far more public and widespread, suggesting a deliberate strategy to make these enforcement actions highly visible. The combination of different federal agencies, ICE, FBI, and DEA, also indicated a multifaceted approach, linking immigration status with broader federal law enforcement priorities. For the communities of Los Angeles, the message was clear. The landscape of immigration enforcement had fundamentally changed, and no one was sure what would come next. The response from the community was immediate and passionate. As news of the raid spread through social media and local news channels, protesters began to mobilize. Activists from organizations like the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, or CHIRLA, quickly organized demonstrations near the raid sites. They condemned the operations as heavy-handed tactics designed to terrorize immigrant families and workers. Chants and signs called for an end to the raids, demanding dignity and respect for all members of the community. In a notable moment, David Huerta, the president of the Service Employees International Union California, was detained by federal agents while he was reportedly observing the events, an act that further inflamed tensions between protesters and law enforcement. The city's political leadership was swift to condemn the federal actions. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass issued a forceful statement declaring that the raids do nothing but sow terror in our communities. Her words captured the sentiments of many local officials who view such operations as counterproductive to building trust between law enforcement and the residents they serve. The Los Angeles Police Department made a point to clarify its position, stating that its officers were not involved in the immigration enforcement actions themselves, but were present to manage public order and ensure safety during the protests. This distinction really highlighted the deep divide between local city policy and the federal government's approach. California's state leadership echoed the mayor's concerns, adding another layer of official condemnation. Governor Gavin Newsom described the raids as reckless and quota-driven, suggesting they were part of a political agenda rather than a sensible approach to immigration. His statement positioned California in direct opposition to the federal administration's policies, reinforcing the state's role as a sanctuary for immigrants and a bastion of resistance against hardline enforcement. The unified front from both city and state officials sent a strong message that, while federal agencies could operate within their jurisdiction, they would face significant political and public opposition in California. The protests were not just about chanting slogans, They were a profound expression of community solidarity. People from all walks of life, immigrants, citizens, activists, and labor leaders, came together to support their neighbors. They shared water, offered legal information, and documented the actions of federal agents with their phones. This grassroots response demonstrated a powerful refusal to be intimidated. The very presence of these protesters, standing defiant in the face of armored vehicles and tactical teams, transformed the narrative of the day from one of fear and submission to one of resilience and collective strength, showing that the spirit of the community would not be easily broken. The events in Los Angeles on June 6 were not an anomaly, but rather a clear example of a broader, more aggressive national strategy on immigration. Under President Donald Trump's second administration, federal agencies have been directed to intensify enforcement efforts across the country. This shift involves more than just an increase in arrests. It represents a fundamental change in policy and tactics. The administration has expanded the use of expedited removal, a process that allows for the rapid deportation of certain non-citizens without a full hearing before an immigration judge. This approach, combined with highly visible raids like those in Los Angeles, aims to create a powerful deterrent and fulfill campaign promises of a tougher stance on immigration. This intensified enforcement is part of a pattern that has been developing for some time. Legal experts and immigrant advocates point to a systematic effort to dismantle protections for immigrants and broaden the powers of federal enforcement agencies. The Trump administration has consistently sought to push the boundaries of executive authority on immigration matters, from building a wall on the southern border to implementing stricter asylum rules. The raids in Los Angeles, with their multi-agency coordination and heavy-handed tactics, fit squarely within this larger framework. They serve as a public demonstration of the administration's commitment to its hardline agenda, sending a message to both supporters and opponents that these policies are being actively and vigorously pursued. Civil liberties organizations have sounded the alarm over these developments, raising serious concerns about the constitutional rights of those affected. Groups like the American Civil Liberties Union argue that these aggressive raids and the expanded use of expedited removal risk eroding fundamental protections. They point to the potential for violations of due process, as individuals may not have a meaningful opportunity to present their case or seek legal counsel. Furthermore, concerns have been raised about the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The ACLU and other watchdog groups are closely monitoring these operations, warning that they could set a dangerous precedent for government overreach that extends beyond immigration. The internal workings of ICE have also seen changes that reflect this new era of enforcement. Around the time of the Los Angeles raids, the agency announced a leadership realignment, which included the retirement of a high-ranking official, Ken Gianalo, after 33 years of service. While such changes can happen for various reasons, they often signal shifts in an organization's direction and priorities. This realignment, occurring amidst a wave of controversial enforcement actions, suggests that the agency is adapting to meet the demands of the current administration's agenda. It points to an internal culture that is increasingly oriented toward aggressive, high-visibility operations as the primary tool of immigration control. In the wake of the raids, Los Angeles is left to grapple with the emotional and social fallout. The immediate impact is a pervasive sense of fear that ripples through immigrant communities. Families worry about sending their children to school or going to work, uncertain if they might be the next target. This climate of anxiety can have long-lasting effects, eroding the social fabric and undermining the trust that is essential for healthy, thriving neighborhoods. Local economies also feel the strain, as workers may be hesitant to participate in public life and businesses that rely on immigrant labor face uncertainty. The raids didn't just remove individuals, they injected a deep-seated instability into the daily lives of countless people. The events of June 6 have also sharpened the ongoing debate about the identity and values of America. On one side are those who believe that strong borders and strict enforcement of immigration laws are essential for national security and the rule of law. From this perspective, the raids are a necessary if difficult step to maintain the integrity of the nation's immigration system. On the other side are those who argue that such actions are inhumane and contrary to the nation's founding principles of welcoming immigrants and offering refuge. They contend that a compassionate and orderly approach to immigration is more in line with American ideals and ultimately serves the country's interests better. This clash of values is playing out on the streets of cities like Los Angeles. Looking ahead, the raids raise critical questions about the relationship between federal, state, and local governments. As the federal administration pursues more aggressive immigration policies, states and cities like California and Los Angeles are pushing back, creating a patchwork of conflicting laws and enforcement priorities. This raises complex legal and practical challenges. How will these jurisdictional tensions be resolved? Can a city truly function as a sanctuary when federal agents can conduct large-scale operations within its borders? The answers to these questions will shape the future of immigration policy and the balance of power in the American federal system for years to come. Ultimately, the story of the Los Angeles raids is a story about people. It's about the workers who were arrested, the families who were torn apart, the protesters who stood up in defiance, and the officials who were caught in the middle. The future remains uncertain, not just for the individuals directly impacted, but for the entire community and the nation as a whole. The path forward will require a difficult conversation about what kind of country America wants to be. It is a conversation about law, but it is also a conversation about humanity, compassion, and the shared responsibility of building a society where everyone feels safe and has the opportunity to belong.